long-time action learning practitioner for 20 years or longer. And first hand, I'm practitioner, and second, I'm also at university teaching action learning and critical action learning for a long time. So, and as you can see, I come from Munich, and despite all the efforts we had for social distancing, no Oktoberfest this year. So we look forward to welcome you in Munich next year. And maybe it's even something how to do sets in these very strange times. So welcome here, and I wanted to discuss with you on Agile action learning. It's a work in progress somehow. Maybe it's a little bit a provocative title even, but what we wanted to do is using action learning, critical action learning in Agile and hybrid organizational settings, exploring what Agile about action learning and critical action learning can add to different situations and approaches applied in organizations to deal with Agile and hybrid situations, and also questioning the old practice in a critical way with a dedicated openness to learn. The question is there any learning required to further develop our understanding of action learning and critical action learning? And this is why I appreciate the discussion with you as colleagues. Just to give you a little bit an insight, we recently, a student of mine, a master student at university, recently did a research with Agile project managers, with project managers in action learning, and the findings were as follows. So they found out 8 of 10 believe project management will become more agile following also the COVID-19 crisis. They said this will somehow change and influence project management so that the traditional way is not working anymore because it's maybe too slow and too little customer oriented and so and involving people. And 7 out of 10 have never heard of action learning. So, which is a shame, I think, and maybe it's specific in Central Europe, but I would also be interested how it is in your environments. 3 out of 10 started to like the idea of action learning when it was explained to them in this little research, and 2 out of 10 planned to test the action learning and could even imagine using it in their further work. And 1 out of 10 practices action learning and with good results, as the person said, and the one using it is a startup. So using action learning. So this was a little bit the research. And for me, I think, especially in this time, action learning, critical action learning provides such valuable input and such valuable support and help to manage the crisis with combining reflection and action in an individual and collective way. So that the question was for us, how could we further this and what is needed? And is it just about marketing action learning, or is it something that action learning also has to think about on how to further develop the way of doing it? So these are open questions. We don't have, in a good action learning way, we don't have ready to go answers for that, but this is the questions that really occupy us. So one of the findings, or before we do that, I would like to somehow to ask you about your own findings on that. And I would like to do a Menti with you. Okay, now could you see that? The question for me would be to share with you what is your experience wherever you are? What do you think keeps organizations sometimes from applying action learning or from applying action learning more often? And I opened this Menti. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you go to Menti.com and use just the code 71 70 58 9, and you could give in, everybody would have would be able to give 4 answers, up to 4 answers. So whatever you want to fill it in so that we can see what the collective experience of us is as to what keeps organizations sometimes from applying action learning. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing all these things. It's still open if someone wants to add to that, and it's very valuable findings for me because it shows so many very important points what you found out. So in the middle is lack of understanding, and isn't it a pity? So we have this approach for 50 or more years and still a lack of understanding. And I also read they are unsure, and I can absolutely follow this. They use other stuff, other models promoted, losing control, very important. They don't have facilitators, maybe. They want experts. So this is a very interesting cloud, a very helpful cloud also. And it shows me the situation in your environments. It's not so different from what it is back here in Germany. And we also invested some times in understanding what happens, and especially to the point other models promote it and use other stuff and so. And we found out we are not alone with this learning. So, and let me come back to my my presentation, and we found a few further approaches to collective learning and action. And just to name a few of them, we found it's Scrum and Agile project management. Scrum is about fast software development through self-organization and customer involvement, and it's based on an Agile manifesto, which has which gives a lot of person-centered opposite to just processes and change-oriented. And so this is what the Agile stuff includes. And the Agile movement uses transformation of the Scrum framework to all areas of the organization. Extreme teaming from Harvard University, tackling complex problems in a rapidly changing teams, which is opposite to the more fixed sets which we use in action learning. And design thinking, already a long tradition, innovation by tackling complex and uncertain challenges. This is what I just gave you. So this is so 4 examples of in what environment we presently are. So, and there are of course many more, like lean startup and so on. And they all tackle problems, have an action concept and learning focus in different ways, some more technical, some even including the social interactive factors and cultural factors. So this is something we found. And then as things sometimes happen, someone from doing Scrum and having done one of the biggest Scrum projects in Germany with more than 100 million euro and for an agency, used Scrum in the way it's done by he says the prophets of Scrum, and he said it didn't work quite well, and he asked me because he had a colleague who had an action learning facilitation training together with Mike Pedler and me, and Christine was with there too, and he asked, isn't there a chance to connect action learning, critical action learning, to Scrum? And so we continued on that. And first, let me give you a short idea about the Scrum framework, as they call it. So if you look in Scrum, you have the product backlog, and it's basically done in sprints. And the sprint is about 3 weeks. And a sprint is done in a self-organized Scrum team. So there is self-organization in the team for the action and the learning. And there is a Scrum master somehow facilitating the Scrum team who is outside the team and sometimes in the organization, sometimes outside the organization even. And of course, there are problems in the Scrum process. They have the daily Scrum or the daily stand-up, where all the sudden progress and problems are addressed. And in the end of each sprint, there's a sprint review together with the product owner, which used to be the customer, but the customer is more involved in the process. And it's even part of the process that there is a reflection and learning cycle. It's called the sprint retrospective. There's reflection and learning. So it seems to be that there is a lot of learning, action and learning involved in that. Then this colleague of mine gave me a lot of examples. So I asked in order to better understand if action learning could be of any help in such a process. And we did some kind of storytelling. And I will show you one of the stories he gave me in this, let me add to that, in this hierarchical organizational setup where Scrum happens. And he said, from this example, there was a Scrum team consisting of 9 software developers. So there was diversity as to experience, specialization, legal status, and pay in this Scrum team. And the situation was that a highly paid colleague who was rated as the top performer suddenly left the team, and senior management was worried how the results could go on, how the process would go on. And then, surprise, nothing happened. There was no drop at all in performance. The team worked as well as before and even made progress. And only then they found out that this colleague, who seemingly was the top performer, in reality was not what he seemed to be. Quite to the contrary, he had been a long time burden to the team, made everything more difficult, and the team tacitly began to bypass him, doing extra work to fulfill the requirements. So for the team, it was a relief when he left. And the estimated damage to the project was from project management, they said, was about 250,000 euros. So quite expensive. And here comes criticality in action learning in the game. And it has, as Karin Trehan let us know, a number of distinguishing features, including its emphasis on the way that learning is supported, avoided, and or prevented through power relations, the linking of questioning insight to complex emotions, unconscious processes, and relations. And so a number of questions could be asked. Of course, we were not in the situation, but analyzed later. But many questions that were even partly coming from project management itself. Why the hell did the team protect someone who let them suffer for such a long time? What kept them from openly expressing their concerns to project management? Why did self-organization work? Apparently it did work, but worked in a self-exploiting manner for the team for such a long time. What kept the Scrum Master from addressing this stressful and costly situations towards management or encouraging the team to address it? What characteristics in the overall project structure and culture did support this? And what was the impact of the job situation of the employees? In this specific case, there were freelancers, subcontractors, and so on. What anxieties, implicit behavioral norms, micropolitics, power dynamics were at work? What learning is required for different actions? So questions like that. And we could not answer all these questions, but the point was, from a more structural point, could we connect action learning to a Scrum setup? And in order to work with all these things in the future, then questions like that come up. And the interesting point was that this Scrum project manager who was responsible for big projects says, if you want to include action learning in the Scrum process, you have to do it from the beginning, and you have to let the senior management know how much it would cost and how it would work, because for them it's extra effort and they have to know upfront. if you just want to do it during the process, nobody will have the time and nobody will have the money for doing it. So we thought about if we can connect it in a way that we wondered if the self-organized Scrum team could work as a set, for instance. If the Scrum Master could be a facilitator in an action learning sense. If reflection and learning could be done in set meetings, so the retrospective, develop it in a set meetings, or even the daily scrums, we were very open as to that. And to see if this could somehow work. So this was among the questions, but there was many things related to that. So Scrum Masters very often are dependent on power relations in the organization. So how independent a Scrum Master would have to be, and how much training would the Scrum Master need? So many questions which are still open questions to us, but this somehow seemed to be one of the points. And I only gave you one insight how it could work, but it's also true that it's not only one Scrum team as developed in the Agile manifesto, but in a big project, there are many Scrum teams. And so the question is about Scrum of Scrums. Could there be also action learning sets where you send someone from each Scrum team into them so that they could, from a senior perspective, do action learning on how to perform this and do it? So many open questions as to that. And I would like now to invite you to go to breakout rooms and discuss a few questions with this example on Scrum. And the questions would be, what is valuable about action learning that organizations presently could profit from? And what is it that action learning might have to learn to be able to be helpful to other concepts of change and learning? Yeah, we had a very nice discussion in the session where I was in, and I would be very much interested in learning from your sides. So Scrum for me only was an example of what happens in organizations. It's many more things, but what keeps action learning from being more successful? And is there anything action learning must learn? So I would be happy if there is, if you just let us know from different groups, what was your findings? I don't know how many groups we had altogether. Was it?
I think there was 4 groups all up.
Okay, so you know what the numbers are. Let's start with group number 1. Just a short comment from each group so that we know what you have discussed.
I don't know whether we're in group 1 or not, but I'll just talk about it. So yeah, we discussed industry involvement, in particular sharing expertise and knowledge across similar kind of sectors. So, you know, if you're a sales consultant selling an action learning product to industry, you probably wouldn't get any kind of hearing. But if you're an industry person who's already used it successfully, then that's the best evidence you can have.
I've got a new pet term as of this afternoon, which is positivism and versus action research. And to my mind, Scrum is to conventional product development what action research is to positivism. So conventionally, products were fully designed using a fairly lengthy process and then were trialed and hit the market, and maybe there were some fundamental issues that hadn't been solved. With Agile, and we've been involved in it lately, it's been more of a matter of you develop a minimum critical specification for the product, or minimum viable product, and you try that and then you learn from that and you particularly with the potential users, and you go through a cyclic process, not unlike action research, to continue to refine and add features to that product based on that experience with the product.
Thank you very much. That's a very good idea to see it this way. And I also think very much that Scrum is very much technicist, as maybe Kieran or so would call that, and which let them overlook what happens in a critical perspective, what happens in the team. So, and I think the team was, in the little example, was self-organizing, but they felt in the hierarchical organization maybe something like not expressing their real concerns, but somehow functioning. Thank you for that, Bob. Mm-hmm.
We actually concentrated on the idea of within project management and Agile. One of those comments was the fact that Agile and action learning are great methods to put together for the set or the Scrum. But we saw, with respect to the second thing, the action learning needed to learn, is that in that situation, in that environment, the norms of an action learning set would need to be set right at the very beginning and very clear, because there is generally the view in a Scrum of people with a lot more knowledge or specific knowledge about the project, and that may create the situation where people feel they can't challenge the thinking of this expert. And an action learning set, you want those challenges. The other thing about the norms was to make sure there was that respect in the way you present those challenges as part of that norm setting. Anything else, Ron?
I think that's him. The point is, one of the core norms is being honest and open and challenging the fundamental assumptions. So things are the way they are because of some basic assumptions. So being ready to challenge those. And I think that you can achieve things faster if people are honest and open, which is a norm of action learning anyway.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm fully with you. It's about the norms and how to introduce it, but also to know that it's the environment in which they do self-organization is very much contradictorial in itself. So because the organization is still hierarchical, and they want them to be self-organized in the way that fits management expectation. And this is somehow a very difficult task, and only with criticality, I think, you can somehow address this in the organization. And this is for us really a challenge which we are discussing, and I have the privilege to discuss this with two senior project managers who were responsible for big projects, and we found the interest of the German Association for Engineers, and I'm really anxious to see how this further continues. But I think there is one more group, right?
Yeah, actually, the one that we were in, Bernhard. Yeah, so I think there was an initial discussion about how, you know, action learning has to compete against all these new products, and we've done a pretty ordinary, as professionals, we've done a fairly ordinary job of promoting this product across industry. But there was definitely thoughts that you know, if we could set up the action learning process within the Scrum, I keep saying that, within the Scrum context, in, you know, definitely incorporating the review reflection in the daily meetings, and setting that up in those teams, that has a great deal of merit. But yeah, it's just trying to convince people that that's a good enhancement of the Scrum process, I think, is going to be the challenge for us all.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think also in this group, one of the points was that marketing, as you called it, and of action learning. And I think somehow it's true. And on the other hand, if I see how much was published about action learning so far, and how long the story is, and how many people say it's a good method, and still we have many success stories, I also wonder if there is something that action learning, not only in marketing, but also in how to do it, has to further develop. I don't have any answers as to that, but we are in that discussion and we want to have more learning about that. Are they right in extreme teaming that there hasn't to be a continuous set process, because they say rapid changes help to further improve solution? What does it mean for action learning if we accept the dialogue with such approaches? And this would be something I'm interested I'm now on the Scrum side a little bit, but I'm also interested in other approaches, because I think the Agile movement needs critical action learning. It cries for it. And so helping in this and supporting in this is something I would strongly support. So thank you very much from my side. I think we are now in time, right? Is that?
Absolutely. So, Bernhard, thank you for that presentation. It was wonderful, and certainly got me thinking about a few things. I'm wondering, we've got a couple of minutes for a couple of questions. If anyone's got any questions for Bernhard, other than on the weather.
Bernhard, do you think that there are cultural issues involved here as well? Say, you haven't had the privilege of coming to Australia, but say Germany versus Australia versus America versus the UK, for example, just to name a few, and perhaps Japan, throw that in as well. The cultural issues that might impact on the use of Scrum and Agile and make some cultures more amenable to it than others?
Yes, Bob. So I'm not a cultural diversity specialist, but from my limited experience, of course it does. And of course it has influence, I think, where approaches have been developed and made successful. On the other hand, when I look to it, for instance, in Germany, people are looking always to what is developed in the Anglo-Saxon world, and they adapt it. And so for me, it's a question, action learning too was developed in the Anglo-Saxon world. And why did some approaches become more popular than others? This is for me something that really, what I really wonder. And that this is where I sometimes am a little bit hesitant to say, is it just a marketing question? But somehow, is it maybe more so that people want to have maybe quick answers, and action learning is not delivering the quick answers, but good answers, which is also worthwhile. And maybe we have to learn. So I'm in a learning process. Yes, I also think culture plays a role, and culture also develops. At least here in Germany, we see that over the decades, it's becoming more and more democratic, less hierarchical, and so it would be a good way of using action learning.
Wonderful. We're just a little bit over time now, so everyone would like to thank Bernhard for his presentation.